the remorseless and undeniable logic of the rebellion. And I think that's what my understanding of this session is to understand the essence, the fundamental argument for rebellion at this point in human history. So I've been helping with mobilization in Australia for about 6-9 months. So I started this work with you guys with one concrete fact in mind, which is that the forest fires that destroyed 20% of Australian forest in 2020 will be a regular event in 20 years' time, according to the peer-reviewed literature. And 20 years after that, that will constitute a cool summer. So for me, that's the fact I remember every time I do stuff in Australia. In other words, for me and for all of us, we have to remember that we're not here to do something abstract like save the world or save the planet. We're here to prevent 20% of Australian forests burning down on an average year, every year within 2 decades, which is the difference between 2020 and 2000. And we know that's not long. So really, for me, Extinction Rebellion is about a concrete threat requiring a concrete response. It's nothing vague or abstract. What we're talking about is the evacuation of Sydney within 2 decades. What we're talking about is the absolute betrayal of the Indigenous population through the destruction of the Australian landmass within 20 years. It's absolutely horrific and it's absolutely immoral. The second thing to concretely understand is we do not have the time. The single biggest strategic determinant of what we're doing is based upon the reality that we do not have the time to continue failing, because that is set by the geophysics. It's not a rhetorical statement, it's a physical statement that within 5 years, 10 years at the maximum, or maybe we've lost it already, it will be too late for any human agency to prevent the complete evacuation of the Australian subcontinent within 4 decades. So that means we have to be absolutely ruthless and clear with ourselves that we have to do what is necessary to transform the economy and politics of Australia this year or next year. That's the project. And what that means is that we have to do what is necessary regardless of the risk. And there's a fundamental difference between Extinction Rebellion and the environmentalist strategy, in the same sense that if you're trying to get over a 10-foot wall, you can jump high, you can jump to 6 foot, you can jump to 8 foot, but it doesn't matter. You're still going to destroy the continent. What is required to get over a 10-foot wall is to go and get a ladder. Going to get the ladder is a fundamentally different strategy, okay? You can jump as high as you can, but it doesn't matter. The only thing that's going to save you is getting the ladder. So what this means concretely is protest is jumping, going to get the ladder is civil resistance. There's a fundamental difference between protest and civil resistance. Protest is asking for change. Civil resistance is creating the change through material struggle. 2 very different things. When you go to a city and sit in the road for 2 weeks, you create the material disruption that puts you in the ballpark of creating material change. Material change has a very concrete definition. It means that the Australian government is forced to enact legislation to decarbonise the Australian economy now, right? It has a direct correlation to the civil rights movement in the United States in the 60s, where for 70 years they protested, and in 1958 they moved into civil resistance. And in 7 years, they forced the federal government to enact a series of impossible, inverted commas, legislation to remove institutional racism in the Deep South. This is the model of Extinction Rebellion. It's forcing governments through material resistance. Material resistance in most eventualities requires a model of going to the city and staying there. Again, I'll give you the concrete numbers. You need to engage in this form of resistance to the point of having 2,000 arrests or thereabouts. In the UK, it's 3,000 arrests. In the United States, the state legislatures enacted legislation when there was 10,000 arrests through Black Lives Matter last year. Okay, so there's a non-linear point at which you get a result. So the point I'm trying to communicate here is we're gathered here today in order for me and hopefully others to persuade ourselves that you have to go to the Australian Extinction Rebellion movement in a position of leadership. And what leadership fundamentally requires is to tell the brutal truth of what is happening, what is necessary, and to demand that people step up. And it's that which created Extinction Rebellion in the UK. It was the proposition that we do something that will be successful, right? It wasn't a continuation of the environmental movement. It was an argument. And I will put at the end of this 10-minute talk the video that drove that argument that 35,000 people looked at before April. And I laid out clearly the remorseless moral and material logic of what Extinction Rebellion is about. And I think what you need to do is to stand up, literally stand up in your meetings and bang out this logic, right? This remorseless logic. If we don't get this job done in 2 years, we're done for. The way we get this job done is by going to the cities, not by going to companies, not by getting distracted. We sit in the road, we get arrested, we get let out, and we go back into the road. So what I would suggest is you have emergency meetings in the States and you make that proposition that you do what's necessary, which is say you will be going to camp to Sydney, to Melbourne for 2 weeks, right? You've only got 100 people going, but you still say you're going for 2 weeks because 1 week isn't enough, right? The literature knows that. It's 2 weeks. It's usually 10 to 14 days to create a government response because that's what exhausts the police. It doesn't matter that you've only got 200 people because once people have been there for 3 days, then as Joel says, they will decide to stay longer. There's no material limit, right? People just lose their jobs. So what, right? We're looking at the end of Australia. We're looking at the betrayal of the Indigenous people. We're looking at the betrayal of all our ancestors. We're looking at the betrayal of our children. Who gives a damn, right? You're 14 days away from legislative change. Once people get that in their head, they come out of the police station and they go back into the road. And as Joel says, you will materially overcome the police in a neoliberal, austerity-based Western state because the police do not have the resources to maintain a continual arrest response for more than 14 days in a Western democracy. So that's it, right? It's super concrete. And that's what's driven the growth of Extinction Rebellion around the world. If we lose that concreteness, then we go into all sorts of confusion. And this, as I said, has to be driven by the 31 of you in this room, right? I mean, I'm being direct because I want to survive. I want my children to survive, right? I'm begging you to do this work, to stand up. At the moment, you've got Sergio, right? You need 5 Sergios, that you're there. There's 1 or 2 of you that can stand up and do a Sergio routine. That's what you need to do. That's my challenge. Thank you.